gender roles, work, women being in the industry and being in relationships. So these are just all in general things that I could talk on and touch on because of my experience.
Okay, I'll throw this out then. This is something I've said when it comes to sex workers as it relates to dating. Not really interested in having the conversation about, just for the sake of time, sex work bad. I mean, not really interested in that. But so I think, for example, if a woman, certainly if she is engaged in sex work, I would consider this non-traditional conduct. Ergo, I don't think she deserves traditional treatment. So I've said, for example, women demand men to pay for first dates. They say that this is chivalry, this is gentlemanly treatment. I think in order for you to, as a woman to be deserving of gentlemanly or chivalrous treatment, you need to correspondingly hold up your end of the deal, which would entail being a lady. And a lady, you preclude yourself from being a lady if you are engaged in sex work of any kind. Thus, I don't think men should pay for first dates. I don't think men should be providers to women engaged in sex work. That's my position. Agreements, disagreements?
The first date, but I feel like a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on a man should pay for the first date. I don't necessarily.
Ever for a worker.
Ever, never. Okay.
Yep, that should be 50-50, or she should pay for everything.
Why?
It's a total reversal of. It's totally non-traditional.
So you think that because women who are in the sex field, they shouldn't have objections or opinions?
Oh well, so there's a couple things here. One, anybody can demand anything. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can get it, maybe you can't. And I do believe that there's a lot of simps out there, and the total decay of society. Men are desperate. Mm-hmm. So a lot of men will put up with a metric fuck ton of bullshit from women and still do the simp shit, still pay for shit, still be a provider, because that's sort of their natural essence. And men have been force-fed a bunch of bullshit and a bunch of feminism for decades, saying it's okay, women can behave this way, women can be sex workers, women can be these progressive, non-traditional women, and you still got to sack up. You still, when it comes time, you still got to be a traditional man, and this is actually something that's upheld by women themselves, and I suppose credit to you women, despite you guys being the least traditional you've ever been, being the most promiscuous, being the most involved in sex work, bringing the least to the table, falling as little in line with traditional gender roles as you do, you still demand traditional treatment, and you still demand men fall into their traditional gender roles, and you still get it because women have massive leverage when it comes to dating, when it comes to sex, and when it comes to the sexual marketplace.
Woman privilege.
Yeah, so I think men. So.
But
yes, basically.
But just because a woman who is in the field of sex work, mm-hmm. it doesn't mean that she won't provide the traditional stuff that the men want.
Well, so I'll grant to you that, for example, a woman who's a prostitute, she might know how to cook, she might know how to clean, she might even be submissive. Although if he says, I want you to stop sex work, and she continues doing sex work, is she really submissive? She could cook, she could clean, she could be feminine, she could be submissive, I guess. But I think being a prostitute, one way or another, is just so in contravention of being traditional that it's kind of like, the big thing.
So then, but isn't that what guys want? A traditional man. You guys want a woman who will cook, who will clean, who will do all that stuff for you.
But not at the cost of she's a prostitute.
But what if he's into that?
Then he's a man who's willing to date a prostitute is probably not a traditional guy who's looking for a good, wholesome woman.
But then you guys always say, what do women have to offer?
Not prostitution.
Yeah, not prostitution.
Wait, let me ask you a question. So do you think typically for most men, do you think OnlyFans is a pro or a con? I know you make money, but do you think it's a pro or a con?
Obviously, it's a con to most men. But what I'm trying to say is,
Okay.
you guys always say, like, what do women bring to the table besides the fact that number one, she has pussy. Number two, she cooks, she cleans, she bows to you.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, we'll play that later.
Well, I feel like this is kind of a straw man, though, because what happens, you're conflating two different phenomena. So the thing that you're conflating is when we ask women what they think they bring to the table, and that's their answer, versus what we say women bring to the table that is desirable to us. So these are two different categories. So neither Brian nor myself have ever said, and I know this for sure, having been on as many episodes as I have, that the only thing a woman brings to the table is her vagina and cooking and cleaning, right? What has happened instead is that we've asked many women, what do you bring to the table in a relationship? And that tends to be their answer.
So then what would you say that women bring to the table?
Well, regardless of what I think that women bring to the table or not, I was just correcting the conflation that you were making there when you say, well, you guys always say that women only bring A, B, and C in response to Brian's fans. And it was clever because the idea there was to say, well, Brian, what's the matter with it? Because you say that that's all women bring anyway, but that's never been Brian's position.
Yeah, so I guess going back to it, what's your argument, I guess? Like, what do you... Because my position is, they don't deserve it. Now, do men still pay for, will men still pay for first dates for, like, an OnlyFans chick? Sure. Mm-hmm. Will men still, do traditional shit? Sure. Mm-hmm. Can an OnlyFans girl score like a masculine guy? Sure. Do they deserve it? Not so I don't think so. But there's a lot of men out there. So, and I think in some ways, a lot of men have been conditioned through exposure to kind of modernity and degeneracy, it's almost, I think, and this is what I'm actually in some ways trying to undo, is no, as a man, you can have standards, and here's XYZ, here's a bunch of standards you can have. One of your standards can be, or should be, it's kind of suboptimal to date women involved in sex work.
If men could live off of doing OF, would it be the same? Then men didn't deserve us cooking and cleaning for them?
So you're saying if there were male stars?
Yeah.
Well, you snuck in a little word there, right? It's very sneaky, loaded language. The word that you snuck in there was deserve.
Because Brian said...
No, hang on. No. Hang on. Let's separate. Again, we got to separate this out when you say deserve, right? Brian's asking, why would a woman who wants a traditional man, but it was not traditional herself, deserve one, right? So you're asking, in this reverse question for deserve, the reason that this doesn't apply is because women don't seem to give a shit about how many women a man has slept with. They think it's weird, in fact, when they're polled on this, that a man stays a virgin until they're in their 30s or 40s. They think that there's something wrong with him.
True, but
and
what
so
if it
they
lives...
tend to compete. They tend to compete over men who have many sexual options, right? And men tend to want to compete over women who have very low body counts for the assurance of paternity, I think.
But I'm not talking about body count. I'm talking about him exploiting himself on an OF.
I mean,
yeah. Well, let's just grant it for a second and say, no, he shouldn't expect to deserve to have a traditional woman. Mm-hmm. But if we take the word deserve out, right, of this idea of who deserves what, would the traditional woman care? That becomes the question. As much as the traditional man would care. That's the question. Mm. So do you think that the trad girl cares as much about the high body count man who was on bands that tons of women desired versus the opposition, I think that they would not care as much.
Traditional women want loyalty as well. Why wouldn't they want
Yes.
loyalty?
Because they don't have to assure paternity the same way that men do. Women are always assured paternity. You always know the child is yours. It comes out of your body. The man, though, he's never assured paternity. And so the reason that men tend to find this revolting, I think, comes from a biological standpoint. We've only recently gotten paternity tests, for instance. And so men want to know that the child that they have is theirs. And so that's why loyalty matters so much. And so they see signs of non-loyal women, and promiscuity is the number one sign of that. Whereas in the reverse, doesn't seem to be the case. Men with high body counts don't seem to have a huge problem settling down and being loyal.
Would you guys rather have a boyfriend with a high body count, or what would you rather have, low or high?
I prefer low.
Low.
It doesn't really matter to me.
Doesn't matter.
Yes, same. It doesn't matter. I think for the man, it's always different.
I think I would prefer low, but I wouldn't ask.
I'd prefer low.
Honestly, I prefer high.
I prefer,
go,
both
girl.
are high, because then they're like, then
So
they
here's
know what
here's
they.
the difference, right? So then the big difference is that just so you know, if this was reversed and it was all just kind of normal men sitting at the table, basically all of them would say that they would prefer low,
That's
right?
true.
And this was quite the mixed bag of women who said, actually more women said high than low. And so that's where the distinction in preference comes in.
Well, only one said hi.
And she's
No,
non-traditional.
no. I don't care, right? The answer
didn't
of I
even
don't
get to
care
answer.
also means that if they have a high body count, it's irrelevant, right? They don't care. So if they're like, I'll grant to you, you're right, I misspoke. I'll grant to you that they didn't specifically say the word high, but if you don't care if it's high, then it's basically saying the same thing. If a man says, I do care if it's high, I think that they would have responded that way.
Right. To Andrew's point, whereas most men would say, I do care.
I do care.
I would care if it's high. I prefer it to be low.
Correct.
But so I guess going back to my original position, which was, I don't think that, like, you as women kind of got to hold up your end of the deal. So my position is, okay, you want guys to be chivalrous, gentlemen, providers, pay for dates. You gotta look, I'm not saying you gotta be a nun, I'm not saying that you don't have to be perfect, but I think involvement in sex work is just, to me, such this blaringly you're a progressive modern woman. You don't deserve the traditional gender. You don't deserve the man to fall into his traditional gender role. You can still get it. I'm sure most sex workers have no problem getting guys to pay for first dates, especially if you date your simp people on OF. Yeah, they'll fucking simp for you.
Personally, I don't think you should even be going on dates if you're a sex worker, because the point of going on dates is to find the person that you're going to marry, as a traditional woman.
Sure.
That's the whole point of going on dates, is to find the person that you're eventually going to marry. And I don't feel like most, not saying all, but I don't feel like most women that are sex workers have that mindset to marry.
Yeah.
At least at the time
does
of them
anybody?
doing sex work.
I know we have 3. You still do OF? Do you do OF?
No.
You do OF. Do you guys have thoughts? I'm sure you guys disagree. I'm sure you guys are no, even despite me being involved in this kind of non-traditional field of work and having nude photos of myself out there, whatever, I still want a man to be chivalrous and be traditional. And is that fair to say, or?
I think it's a little crazy to say that single women in the field shouldn't date at all. If there's
No. I'm sorry. She said that.
Yeah.
I'm moving right along off of that because
sorry.
that's not my position. I'm not inclined to. You can date. Go find yourself a degen soy boy lefty though. But let's get to my position, which is, I already stated it, so.
So we don't deserve this. Is that what we're?
No, you can look if you can find a guy who's willing to date you.
No,
Sure.
But
In
you
fact,
said that we can find them, but we don't deserve them. So I'm just
I
making clear that's what you're trying to reiterate.
I don't think
right?
it's a fair deal.
I agree.
Although then I guess you could say, well, life's not fair, blah blah blah. But
it's definitely not fair. I agree. I've
guy.
been in that industry for a long time, and I don't think it's fair. I would never expect a fully traditional role from a man, and I've been in, I would say, a relationship where the man did not care at all. I provided everything. I paid for everything. Never had a job. And then I dated someone who was the opposite. Does not like it at all. Is not okay with it. Does not feel like we should have a traditional role because of that. And so I've dealt with both, but I do agree that I don't think that sex workers, I don't necessarily like the word deserve, but I don't think that dynamic works if you're a sex worker. You cannot expect a man to give you all of the traditional things if you are in that industry at all. But I think that a woman can be in that industry and still value traditional roles and want that eventually, but I think she has to stop doing sex work and then pursue a traditional role with, gender role relationship.
And I'll just add this, like these are my views, and I know for a fact that I can sit here all day and say, well, these girls who do sex workers, they don't deserve this. But at the end of the day, I know there's a sucker born every minute. New sucker turns 18, whatever I know that you guys, despite whatever the scope of your sex work is, whether you're strippers or doing hands, shooting porn, even literal escorts or prostitutes, I know the guys will still, there are men out there who will still hold up their end of the bargain, hold up their end of the deal. They'll pay.
Less and less though.
Perhaps through the work of the charitable work of the whatever podcast.
And in my opinion, that will never work. They might do it for a while, but that will never work long term. That relationship will not last. Any man in that, in the beginning, they might think, you could even say in the position, they think like, oh, if I do all these things, then she might stop. Right. But that has to be like a hard line. Like you have to decide, I want to stop so that I can have this traditional relationship. So I
guess I do want to move things on and wrap it up on this specific point, but it seems like many women have they've completely forsaken, abandoned, cast aside almost any and all of their traditional gender roles, yet oftentimes with the utmost entitlement, they still expect men to adhere to our traditional gender roles. It's kind of like you want your cake and to eat it too. It's like, on one hand, you have women who are just pushing like liberal, feminist, progressive equality values as far as humanly possible. Sex work, totally fine. Men are insecure if they are unwilling to date women who are currently letting other men blast inside of them. No modesty in either their conduct or appearance, promiscuity, etc. On the other hand, when it comes to your gendered expectations of men, you may as well be like 1950s bachelorettes. You want men to be chivalrous, you want men to be providers and protectors and leaders, take all the initiative, pay for dates, open the car door, get you flowers, get down on one knee, propose, spend 5 figures on a ring.
Double standard.
It's just, to me, it's just kind of crazy. So, I don't know. Just